Welcome to Venture Step Podcast, where we discuss entrepreneurship, industry trends, and an occasional book review. The current venture capital model accepts a 90% fail rate as the cost of doing business, gambling on single home runs to save a portfolio. But what if this fail fast mentality could be changed by measuring the human element? Today, we're joined by Logan Yonavjak to discuss how the Founder Readiness Institute uses AI to standardize the evaluation of founder soft skills, removing systematic bias, and providing a data-driven path to better investment decisions. Logan is the co-founder and CEO of the Founder Readiness Group. She's a 2X founder, and she's directly raised $85 million in institutional capital for climate investing. Logan is also a founding member of Angels VC. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Institutional Investor, and now she's on the show with us. Welcome, Logan.
Thanks so much, Dalton. It's great to be here. I loved that intro and the way you characterized, some of the imagine the future of venture.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can change, and I know that you're helping to push for some of that change.
Yes.
So with the Founders Institute Readiness Group, they have what you call the micro readiness score, and the coachability score for founders. And I think there's two things that you discussed prior was like, one is like the evaluation of soft skills. And then the other one is like, how coachable are these people? And then bridging some of those gaps. But before we dive into that, can you just give an overview of what is being solved for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really helping illuminate an individual's capacity to lead under pressure and with complexity. And so instead of just a personality assessment, like, are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? We're actually evaluating how you're likely going to think, behave, and act under pressure and with more complexity. So that's really appropriate and important for startup leaders in particular.
No, that I think that would make a lot of sense. Like, can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen type of situation for sure.
Yeah. But and we do that. We have kind of 6 different areas within that we focus on, and coachability is one of them. We also look at emotional resilience, what we call purposeful agility, your ability to pivot while holding the big picture in mind, team climate IQ. So we have a number of ways that we're actually grounding what we mean by leadership capacity.
And you'd mentioned it, and I'm going to butcher it because it's been a couple weeks since we spoke, but you talked about like leadership science, or is that
Vertical development.
what is it called?
Well, so we the body of work that is underpins our system of analysis is vertical development science, and it's a body of about 40 years of psychological research and then organizational psychology. Um, I could pull in some researcher names like Cook Scroiter, and others, but basically it's looking at what I said before of like the ability of a person to grow in their ability to hold complexity and to work under pressure over time. And so one of those, just to give a quick anecdote, so the coachability piece that you and I have been talking about a little more deeply. So when someone is kind of higher in their ability, their coachability score, if you will, in our assessment and our approach, they are likely going to be able to hold a lot of different feedback or systems in place while keeping themselves in as one component of that system rather than being the focal point of the system. So when you're earlier in your developmental patterns, you tend to self-identify as the main focus of the system. And so often when people give you feedback or give you constructive feedback on your business, you might take it personally because you're not really as objective about, the system itself, and then seeing yourself in that feedback in the context of a larger system.
Maybe just translating to an employer-employee type of situation. If you're getting feedback about the project or your code, it's not necessarily your code. And maybe also this could be something to look out for when you're giving feedback, when you incorporate some of this thought process and methodologies. Like when I try to review people's code, it's like I don't say your code or
Yeah.
these kind of things. I say the code of the project needs to get optimized. Like these are the reasons why we need to make these changes versus your code. But also when you're getting feedback from people or a company or your pitch, then people could internalize it because they're probably the only one working on it. Or there's one other person. It's like, oh, then that's on me. But it's actually it is, but it's not personal, is what you're saying, right?
I think that's a really nice way to frame it, in the sense of even the people giving feedback can change the way that they think about the system that they're looking at. And the person writing the code or updating the code is just one element of that system. So they can bring in all these different perspectives, and it makes for a better outcome because no one's really attached to their specific identity within that.
System, or body of work. So if we just back out a little bit, how does this help? So we got really detailed on what can be done to study the adaptability, dealing with pressure of a human being in a leadership structure or a system. How does that help a VC go from, okay, I've got I've got my investment box. Like I want my founders to look like this and come from these pedigrees of schools, and they may be working on these ideas. And I'm really looking for like these type of personality types because like that's what I think is successful.
Yeah, I think that one of the ways I've been thinking about it is like a weighted average. So, in making a decision right now in the venture space, what is typically occurring is that the decision making about people comes from a warm intro or to references, and then the team's gut feel or like felt sense of the person. And all of those are valuable points of information, but I think we need an additional assessment or body of information to come in to improve the way that we are evaluating people more objectively and with less bias. And so, what we're seeing as a result of the current status quo, which is the warm intros, the referrals, and the kind of gut feel, we're seeing 65% of companies failing because of people problems, and we're seeing a lot of minority and women founders, for instance, receiving only 3% of VC money. So those are just like those are just two statistics that are interesting to look at in the system, but they're coming from, I don't know that the way that we're doing things is really yielding better results if we're looking at it from the perspective of more companies making it or more diverse founders getting access to capital.
I think there's a great point. And I was just thinking anecdotally of something I did during an interview process. And this isn't pitching, but this is me interviewing for different positions when I was looking for a job like a couple years ago. And so I have like a data science background and then I have like a product background. And so I was applying to data science roles and then product roles. But what they deem as like product, what the interview, when I was interviewing, what they deemed like within the product box had certain personality types, certain hobbies, certain things that they liked and that resonated. And that's what passed me through the gate. And
Yeah.
then I do the same thing with data science. Like if I was doing data science, I talk about like nerdy things I like to do in my free time and tinkering with code and doing these things. And I would avoid like talking about sports or like other type of athletic activities. Whereas product, I talked about like running and fitness and all sorts of things and like doing hard stuff or whatever. And it's not necessarily saying that, hey, just because I run and do these things, I don't know how to code. But in the mind of who I was speaking with, it was like, okay, like these people aren't serious, or like this isn't really what I'm looking for. Like I know that if these people do these things and they play like 4X real time strategy games, like they're probably better at coding than not. That's not necessarily true, but I had to get through the gate, so I just played my role, in that scenario, but that can prevent you from getting great talent for sure. Like if people don't know the gate that they need to pass through, or if they don't want to play, then they don't typically get through the first vibe
Yeah.
check, I guess.
I think that's a really good, I mean, it's like those things are helpful to know. And I think that there are proxies for a successful outcome. Like you get a sense for, okay, people that do these things and have these grades and went to these schools are likely going to be better, but you're also missing out. You might be filtering out people that would be great at the job, but they just don't have X, Y, and Z attributes. So we're talking about capacity, not personality characteristics or like attributes or hobbies or all these other things. So, like I said, I feel like it's just that we're missing a piece of the equation when we're making a decision. Like, why not bring in some of these analytics into the system so we can hopefully make more informed people decisions?
Agreed. And it's not necessarily replacing the intros or these other things. It's another piece of information for that person to evaluate the company and leadership better.
Yes,
More
exactly.
information to make better decisions. Be more informed.
Yeah, be
That's
more
all it is.
informed. Yeah, like wouldn't you like to know? That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. No, I think everybody would love more information, definitely in today's day and age. If if that is the case where there is, I would say, a better lens on who that leadership group is that's applying, how does that help remove the bias or level the playing field a little bit for minorities or women that are applying? Because you said like 2% of the funding goes to women
Women
and
and
people
minorities.
and
Yeah, and
minorities.
I think it's around 2 to 3. I've heard, but, obviously still within the band of, surprising. But, and those are just 2 forms of diversity. Obviously, I'm not trying to make this a conversation about just, improving, like the diversity of, specific genders or ethnic backgrounds, but I think there's many different kinds of diversity that we're missing out on. But I think we are kind of we when we're enabling our pattern recognition to inform our decision making, that has validity. But I think sometimes these patterns have unconsciously become ingrained in us, and we're not necessarily questioning where they're coming from. And so we're just making these decisions like, oh, I really resonate with this person, or they really, but they might just sound like you. They might, be very charismatic, or they might be verbose. People tend to really like when people talk a lot in some instances. I mean, they're just a variety of factors of that can persuade someone to make a decision to hire when what we're doing takes it's got a human component, but we're really taking AI and we're evaluating the way that people structure sentences through stories, through telling stories, and through giving examples of something. We can get a good sense of how they structure their thinking and their sentence structures to give that perspective of like how complex is their thinking and how resilient are they under pressure. And so those are really what we're looking for. And so you're getting to the underpinnings of how someone's operating internally and making decisions. It's just a good proxy for that.
Did the exam. We don't have the results back yet, but I was definitely intrigued about the whole thought process and the questions. I'm not going to share the questions that was asked because it's like, it's private, but the is just the questions and then the way that everything was structured. It was like, hey, this is the situation, this is what you're doing, no pressure. And then I got in there and then I was like, hold on, my mic isn't working. And then I had to retake my take, and it was like big bold. It was like, this is your last take. I was like, oh no. All right, I'll try my best. And I think on my first question, I think it says like the estimated time to complete this question, like read the question, come up with your response and reply. should be within 2 minutes. And I was like, oh, I'm over the like just the whole thing. It was just such a funny situation. But I I thought that the way that the system of the questions that were being asked from me, and then the examples of how you should think about answering the question, I think led to me providing anecdotal information, examples, and like background from my thought process. Like it definitely asked you to like include examples of like what you're talking about and try to structure it, but also said, don't talk too long. Like you only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah, it's there's a whole like we spent a lot of time to set up the questions in a way that would help reveal some of that inner workings or how you are making decisions and considering complexity in your decision making. So that's what we're aiming to do. And just to be clear, we have assessment tools, but we also can take any transcript data. We could take this conversation, we could take a publicly available talk and ingest it into our we call it the readiness engine, and come out with similar results. We've tested it many times against synthetic data, against human data. It's really fascinating, like what you can pull out of a short transcript in terms of like pinpointing someone's development.
It's crazy. What do you think on maybe two examples or two questions? One, from your end, the results I'm assuming that you've taken the exam and or have used the transcript. Like, so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about like your score, and then also if there was a situation where, hey, maybe didn't get like the warm and fuzzies when I had my intro with so and so, but when I reevaluated and thought through like the score, this is like a conversation with you and one of your investor partners. Thought through the score, I reevaluated my thought process on how I thought about this pitch.
I so the first part of what you said, I'm always happy to share my score. So we score along 6 different dimensions for the founder readiness level. And so I scored kind of between 4 and 4.5 on most of them. And what that's really saying is like you spend most of your time in this range or like at this point. And so I might have good days where I'm really like at a 5, but I'm mostly spending time where I mentioned between like 4 and 4.5. I was a little surprised by a few of my results. I thought I was higher on a few than the assessment showed. And when we dug in, my co-founder is the one who delivered my results. He made some recommendations that were fascinating. It was like as a leader, one of my growth areas is to share more of like how I'm thinking about making decisions, like the frameworks that I'm pulling from and the observations I'm making to inform the decisions that I'm coming to. So to be just a lot more explicit about that would help create a sense of flow state and connection with my team that would help them understand where I was headed rather than me just kind of coming in and saying, I've arrived at this decision, like here we go. And so that was one concrete area where I didn't realize there was such a disconnect between like how I thought and like how I was presenting those ideas and frameworks.
That's interesting takeaway. I wonder what my results will be, but do tell. But I don't know. You've been a great speaker for. I'm just surprised that that was the feedback. Because you've been a great speaker for, I don't know, for a long time. I've seen videos like 10 years ago, and like you're an
Well,
excellent
thank you.
speaker.
I appreciate that. I
And
mean,
so
maybe you show up as your best, when you're presenting. So,
when you're that's your flow state when the mic's on.
but I think you asked a separate question, which is how has talking to investors or others about this tool like informed how I've been developing it?
Yeah, that, or if it has changed their thought process on evaluating pitches.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of investors haven't thought about this as like an area of analysis. I think that a lot of VCs I've met or angel investors or accelerator programs, they don't have a formalized way of evaluating people. That's been one of the interesting findings or confirmations from my original idea was like, yeah, there just isn't a lot of formality. A few use assessment tools and a few use coaches, but very, very few of a percent. I would say like 90% do not. And so I think we've run into a lot of like curiosity and, oh, this is possible. But a lot of VCs, I think um, feel like they're doing a good job reading people and like picking companies. And so it's been an interesting journey, trying to understand like what the pain points really are or perceived pain points are of VCs. And so it's informed a lot of like how I've thought about presenting like the opportunity. And yeah, we're doing a lot now with like larger corporates and middle market companies as clients.
I find the offering overall fascinating. Like the whole thought process of when we're talking about diversity, we talked about like this, people of color and women, but it's also the people can easily identify that as like, okay, diversity, but there's also like diversity of thought, religion,
Exactly.
background,
Yeah.
area, class, all of those things. Like you'd want different spectrums of people at your company because it is like scientifically proven that the more diverse of like thought, background, all these things, like you call it just diversity of your company, the better off and more resilient it is because you've got people with different challenges and uh, I don't know what to say, like environments that they were raised in, and that correlates to different ideas and different schools of thought, which then makes things more cool in my opinion. Like I just keep it simple, it's cooler and you get cooler things and you can build faster and do all these things like that. But I find that part really cool. And then also I talked about it in my interview during the readiness exam. It's just like there isn't a right or wrong person. Like each person has strengths and weaknesses. And so when you're building out your executive team or you're hiring another important leader at the startup, you've got to make sure that one, people like each other because they're going to be around each other a lot. But then also it's like, what are their weaknesses that like you need to be aware of? And like, are you acceptant of those weaknesses? And does that correlate with the weaknesses? Do they correlate with what the company needs right now?
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
are you okay with like that weakness being a problem for, I don't know, say 2 years? Or if you're not, then you have to look somewhere else. But I don't think people in companies have a good idea of what they're getting into until they get into it, or that they've known the person for like 5 years and like that's why they were hired.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we're still, in the age of AI and all these technological advancements, we're still a bit bes- bespoke. I don't know. That's not the right word. We're still very like informal in how we actually make hiring and promotional decisions. Like you go to major companies and they're like, yeah, we did 5 interviews and had AI read a resume. And it's like, interesting, and some use assessment tools, which I could talk about like why ours is different. But it's just very interesting to me that there's an informality in like these sometimes the most major decisions you make about individuals and people and teams are just kind of left to like a few kind of casual conversations.
Which is a wild thing when you think about it with all the technology. Where are we on these important, like an important decision? I feel like if when you're hiring somebody, it's most of the time like a one door decision where you can change your mind later on, but you still have lost probably 6 or like 8 months. Maybe you have a quick turnaround and have to rehire, but that's still another 6 months because you got to hire the person, you got to onboard them, and then you don't really know until like 2 months from now when they get hired. So if you do that twice, it's 6 months. If you're waiting till 6 months, like it's still like 6 months. So like, that's a long time. And when you're talking about at a like a leadership standpoint or at a startup, 6 months is a very long time to have a gap,
Yes.
and you got to get it right
And I
sooner
feel
than
like
later.
these tools kind of help, make that more prominent. Like hopefully, uh, when used in sequence with other decision-making processes, it's like, yeah, could we just improve the odds by, in the case of startups, like 5 to 10%. That would have material impacts on portfolios all over the place. Like, I don't want to misquote, but someone recently told me that 40% of corporate promotional hires do not work out. And so, you're hiring a person for an executive role, and 40% of the time it's not going to work out. I mean, that's pretty high. And
Wow,
there's many
I didn't know
reasons
that.
for that, but like, could we prevent some of those by just flagging and better understanding the individuals that we're looking to promote and whether they're a good fit for that job?
At least there would be a process. And I think you talked about with your feedback on your exam is you have a thought process and you got to a result, but you explained the thought process and provided enough background to everyone became in their flow state or optimized. It's kind of the same process what you just talked about right now was if you had this kind of internal process of evaluating internally people that are maybe eligible for promotion for these elevated positions, then if it didn't work out, like in what I'm saying, if it didn't work out, if that individual or individuals were not qualified or had some concerning aspects about their capabilities, and then you had to go external, then that makes sense. But if you don't do that and then you just go external, then people are bummed out. It's like, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
well
there's a
now it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Cause it's like, okay, well, we hired externally and then it's like, well, Logan was great for the job. And everyone's like, well, why wasn't Logan considered? And then it's
it
like, oh, we made that
erodes
decision.
trust. It erodes.
And so then people are pissed and they leave, or I got passed up on, or whatever it may be. But if you do the other way and you hire internally and it doesn't work out, then that's also a problem. So I think it's just like we talked about a little bit earlier in the show is just transparency on the methodologies and like the capabilities and like where they are at a person at that time in providing feedback and then making the judgment call and like what are the current needs immediately at the company.
Yeah. And I feel like that's I've had people tell me I'm nervous to take something like this, or um investors be like, "Well, I'm nervous a founder will back off from the deal if I ask them to take something like this." I think that's interesting information. Like, I don't, I guess personally would not be nervous about taking one of these assessments. But that's because I've always been really focused on like self-improvement and getting feedback and things like that. And not to say, I'm not denigrating anyone for not wanting to take an assessment, but it just seems like I would rather know what I'm getting evaluated on than all of these like inherent biases and other ways people are always judging you, and you might not know why you didn't get a job. Or it just, to me, it's like this adds like a bit of structure to people decisions.
And that structure leads to better decisions, or at least giving people more information to make decisions
Yeah,
versus no transparency.
you get it. You get it. Yes.
Yeah, it's just like it's an odd thing. Like I think so. Andy, who was like the founder of a Stretch, who was on the show maybe 5 episodes ago, his company was all about pricing transparency, and like there's correlations here where it's like, okay, this is about leadership transparency and capabilities. This vertical science, and then his company was about pricing transparency for grocery stores and the whole Instacart scandal. And it
Hmm.
just seems like there's a big push, like within AI, like now they've got AI and these capabilities, like there's a big push for transparency, while there also is a big push for like innovation. So like there's like these two different paths that people are pursuing all at the same time. But I find it interesting that it's kind of a theme that's popping up.
Yeah. Well, I on that note, it's kind of an interesting. I was just speaking with a seasoned sales professional, and she was sharing that she just heard a statistic that 17-ish% of new hires into companies are actually not people. Like,
Wait,
they
what?
go through an interview process and like a resume evaluation, and they're not actually real people. And so companies are like onboarding these like AI agents or bots, if you will, and come to find out, like, they went through this whole interview process and it wasn't a person. And
Really?
so, like, that is a whole nother level of, like, yeah, talk about transparency. Like, how do we handle all of this? Like, all these AI capabilities are leading to, like, more opacity in some ways about, like, anyway.
Wait, I'm just curious. I don't know how knowledgeable you are about the 17% are not people, but I was like, wait, hold on. How do you get hired and you're not a person? But so they have the resume and that stuff. That could be not a person, but then how do they do the interview? Like it was just like not a, a video interview, or they just did phone interview,
I
or
think it's both. It's like, I think you with AI is good enough now, you can create, like, a video of a person and have them, like, speaking and responding to interview questions. So,
yeah, I,
it's a
I
wild
do, I
world.
do
It's
agree with that. Yeah.
yeah.
I know that I can clone with all this podcast stuff. I've cloned my voice a couple times, and it was, I did it a while back, like year plus ago, maybe. And it was really good. The voice cloning was like, people couldn't tell that it wasn't a real, like it wasn't me,
Yeah.
which is no good because, well, that's a problem, but it is what it is. And that's one of the reasons I talked about it a couple times recently, but it's one of the reasons why I do the video podcast, and I've always started a video podcast, is like, how do you know that the person on the show is a real person or
Yeah.
some kind of AI person, or how do they know that I'm real?
Yeah.
It's just a weird world that we're going into about this transparency thing. But I guess we'll get back on topic about
I know.
the.
I just thought it was so, I mean, and just on that note, like, one of the things, I think one of the pain points that we can help solve is not just like, is this a real person, but handling AI as a tool or set of tools is a complexity skill. Like, those who are rising to the top or, like, able to position themselves for this labor market really are people who know how to manage AI and who know how to leverage the tools, and that's a complexity skill. And so that's something we would measure. That would be like kind of later stages in the evolution of our tool, in the sense that what we could measure would be like complex, like ability to hold complexity. And that's a really useful thing for these environments where you're hiring less people maybe, but you need them to be more fluent with complexity.
Yeah, that's interesting because as the technology advances, skills have to shift, and they have to shift substantially in certain areas and certain industries. And every industry is going to be affected, but in certain more than others. And the whole skill range is like completely, I mean, what was typically required is kind of botched. I mean, it's still important, but the emphasis isn't as high. And the people that I know that are in my age bracket that like I went to high school with or in college and they're doing a great job, they're all very sophisticated in using these AI tools to optimize the companies that they work at. And
Exactly.
they are in leadership positions, or they do like high level consulting for large Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies. Like, how do you build apps and do these things and optimize these processes? And I don't know, maybe, and I'm in a similar space too, like where that's like it was pretty much my gig when I first started on at the company I work at now. It's like, okay, how can we be more efficient? How can we get better, faster?
Yeah, and I
And
think if you measured, the capacity of those individuals, they'd probably be quite high, and it'd be interesting to look at, like, who's being selected for those roles and how they would show up in our scoring system.
yeah, overall, I think that the progress that we're going to make on many different aspects is going to be huge. But I'm also very excited about like what Founder Readiness Institute is looking to do on this capacity standpoint, complexity, like all these things. I find, and I've said it before in the episode, and I've said this before many times in this episode, like the phrase, but it's just overall very fascinating to be able to look under the hood on something you haven't been able to do before in like this kind of sophistication. Like you could go you could go to a course or maybe go to like these individual people, but there isn't like a standardized system to evaluate these measurements. Like it's all subjective, but I, c- I find it very cool and I'm super interested in seeing the results is so I can see like what's under the hood. Like I don't even
Yeah.
know what's under the hood for myself. And so
Yes,
to
I'm
be able to
really
see,
excited to share your results. No, it's really fascinating when you get them because what we've heard is like I just had a founder recently say my mind was blown. Like that was her literal feedback, as she just said, I couldn't believe that you pulled out what you did from the transcripts.
you're literally pulling out nuggets of information out of my brain. So,
Patterns. It's I just think, some people are good at reading other people and picking up on these patterns, but like anything, it's a skill. And I think a lot of people are overestimating or over aggrandizing their ability to make these assessments of people. And it's just like anything else, it's good to have professional input or kind of a third party to augment your decision making. And so that's really the role that we're playing. We're not saying, hey, we'll come in and make the decision for you. It's like, here's some more information. Um, so
okay, maybe a leadership evaluation mediator.
yeah, that's a nice, I like that, mediator. And we're also helping try to prevent mediation from needing to happen. So all those lawyers and mediators that are required are largely a result of a lack of understanding of people patterns, because that's later stages when conflict arises, and maybe that some of those examples could have been caught earlier.
Maybe on the other side of the napkin is how do you know that you're getting into the right you may or may not be able to answer this, but how do you know that you're getting into the right area for signing on with the VC? Like I know that I've had friends who've had like badish deals, or when the paper was signed, it was like different type of interaction versus like everything's warm and fuzzy, and then dotted line sign. It's like, whoa, like this is different. Like I know that there is this, like you could speak to them, and but you don't necessarily never know until you're married. Is there anything on that end to, I guess, evaluate? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, um, I think if there's publicly available information, we could run it through our system. But if it's already out there in the public
Mm,
domain, if there's anything on the investor. But I would say, it's good to talk to people who've worked with other people in the past. That's obviously like a proxy for better understanding. I think other companies that might have taken capital from the VCs would be a really good thing to look under the hood. I think it's difficult as a company because often you're really you really need money, so you're kind of like willing to take
mhm,
what's out
yeah.
there. But the VC model puts you into a very aggressive trajectory, and I think you have to really evaluate whether your company's that kind of a company to begin with. But then if you're going to take the capital, just doing a bit more under the hood in terms of like, I would say the main thing you can do is talk to other companies who might have taken capital from those companies. But just know, 9 out of 10, they're kind of assuming like 9 out of the 10 companies they invest in are not going to make it. And maybe digging in a little bit more to them in their kind of dating process of like, how do they really support founders, or how do they think about the people side of the equation? Like I don't think that question's asked enough.
Mm. Yeah, because you're not just interviewing, you're also interviewing them. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's a different power dynamic for sure. Like if you really need the money, it's like, all right, well, I guess I guess I'll just deal with this stuff. Like, I don't know, but considering all that said, how do people, if they're interested or they want to learn more, get in contact with you and or the Founder Readiness Institute?
Yeah, so we just launched a new website. Actually, it's the peoplereadinessgroup.com. And so that's our new website. And you can reach us there. We have a contact form. You can email me at logan@founderrl.com. And we would love to continue to hear from folks in the VC space, accelerators, corporates. Like we're really interested in supporting these decision making processes and helping improve and reduce hiring and execution risk. I mean, that's what we're about. So we constantly have content on LinkedIn as well. We're releasing a lot of free content, digestible, interactive content you can download and use in your own in decision making. So we have a lot coming out, and just excited to connect.
Yeah. Once again, super excited about the whole initiative. It's very cool. And closing out the show, wherever you are in this world, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for listening. Listen in next week.